continue to work on the doc manager class, which I changed to a dockable layout now. I think I'm not gonna need the doc manager, but it's basically the same thing that it's gonna do. And right now I'm thinking about the drag and drop functionality. So luckily, the way that I'm thinking about implementing now is gonna be with the tab container. And I'm just gonna use the tab container, but maybe later on I'm gonna use other control nodes as the docs. But I think that tab container is probably the best because I learned more about it and I realized that you don't need to show the tabs. So I think it's just the perfect container to use for something like this. And luckily, the tab container already has the like some of the functionality for the drag and drop. And I'm just trying to see if I can change some of the functionality to make the structure of the layout change depending on where you drag the tab. Because the functionality they have already is for moving one tab from one container to another container, or for moving the tab on the container itself, just changing the order of the tabs. And what I'm thinking about trying to do is to move the tab to like when you move the tab to the middle of another tab container, it's gonna restructure the tree so that, and this is the part that is kind of complicated and confusing. But I think if the tab container only has one tab, then it should move the whole tab container to another location on the tree, and then restructure the splits. But obviously it has to be done in a way that it works on any layout possible. But it's basically going to be just restructuring the tree. So I'm just going to spend a bunch of time probably trying to studying the tab container logic that they have and trying to understand how it works. Like the main thing that I'm confused by, which I started studying this today. So the last thing that I was confused by is what happens during the drag and drop functions when they run. So I'm gonna go over the class and I'm gonna talk about how it works on Godot. To implement the drag and drop functionality. I'll put some time. Put 4 hours here. 2 hours. I don't remember which one I was looking. This is basically the class that I'm building, and I think it's gonna be just this one. I'm not a doc manager. I'm gonna go over with this code, I think, because I'm gonna go over with the debugger probably to study the cycle. But the macro is sent forward something, I think. I always forget the name. I set drag forwarding. So this is basically so the way that it works is that I still don't understand very well. But as far as I understand right now, the tab container is the class that is going to actually draw the visualization. And the tab bar is the class that is responsible for managing the tabs themselves. And the tab container creates, so you only need one tab bar per tab container, so it's not necessary to add another tab bar as a child. So after you initialize the tab container, because it already initializes the tab bar. Like one of the questions that I had is that if you don't put any children to this class, it's not going to display the tabs, it's just going to display the container. And then after you put one children, it's going to display the tab based on the name of the child. Or you can manually set by calling a function on this class. And the reason why this happens is because of the functionality of this class here, because when you build the class, it's just going to build a tab bar, but the tab bar is not going to have any tabs. So on the drawing function of the tab container, So on Godot, it's gonna be on the notification function, and notification function receives an integer that is gonna be an enum that determines what logic you want to run at different parts of the cycle. So usually it's gonna be on the notification draw part of the cycle. This I think here that the classes are gonna put their drawing logic. And then this class here basically is going to, it's not that hard to understand here. The part that is kind of hard is the theme cache, because the theme cache involves other macros and like the whole system on Godot. And I spent a bunch of time studying this, but I kind of forgot already, so probably gonna have to review this at some point. But I assume that this is gonna get the style from the theme, whatever theme you are using, and uses from this theme cache because that's struct, I think. That's, yeah, so every time that you see a class that has this struct declared inside of the class, it means that they're probably using macros to set up overrides on the theme. So it's like theme customization on the class. I think that they do it on the bind methods. Bind methods is the function that is also a standard that every class uses to subscribe the functions and the properties of the class. Yeah, so this functions, so this binds enums from the class, and you need another macro as well, which I think this class also has. So usually you need to use this macro here to subscribe enums because they're going to define a bunch of structs that the variant class uses to translate types. So by using this macro to subscribe the enum, it allows you to use the enum on functions and subscribe them with the bind methods or with properties. Because then Godot is going to be able to translate the types using the variant class. Because these functions here use the variant class as well to create the state of the method bind class and this method info as well. It's basically parsing or like caching the state of the functions with metadata that is stored on the class state. And then based on that, it allows Godot to save or to serialize the information of the classes, serialize and deserialize. But here, yeah, so these macros here are the ones that are used to override themes, I think, or get the themes from, and this is connected with the theme cache there. So everything that they put on the theme cache, they have to use this enum to subscribe. And it's basically going to use the value from the theme. So if you override the value using, I think, theme overrides something, there's different types of overrides depending on what the theme variable is going to be, if it is a style box or an integer or something like that. And apparently there is this one as well. And this one is going to set this on the ThemeDB. ThemeDB is the class that is going to manage the theme context on Godot. So I think that this is the callback function that gets called at some point in the cycle on the ThemeDB that is going to get the value from the theme. Yeah. So it basically allows you to use those values that they subscribe on the theme cache throughout the class so that you're able to override them outside. I think that's the purpose of doing this. So like, let's say you have a class that you're using type container and you want to change the way that a panel looks or something like that. You would call a function from the theme, which is theme override or something like that. And then as the ThemeDB, or as the control class is calling a function that's going to use ThemeDB to traverse the whole tree to look for themes, is going to see that you have an override and then it's going to use the value. As far as I remember, it's something like this. So on the notification draw there is going to be, they're using this theme cache to create the panel and to create the tab bar. And then they get the canvas ID using this function here, which is just from canvas item, which the class inherits from, I think. I'm pretty sure that the class inherits from canvas item. So, and that's a server function, I think, that's going to use the ID to draw the stuff. Because this is basically performing the draw of what shows there. And what determines whether or not it's gonna draw the tabs is this get tab height. And this uses the tab bar, which is the class that initialized there in the beginning, to get the height. And this works based on the how many tabs this class has. So when you don't add anything as a child of the tab container, it's not going to have any tabs because it didn't stat any tabs on this, which means it's not going to have the height, which means it's not going to draw the tab on the drawing function. And the reason, the way that it works is that there isn't any function that explicitly does anything when a child gets added to the tab container. And this is the part that I didn't know, but now I know. It's basically this function here, add child notify, which I didn't see before. But the way that they designed this is that every time that you add a child to a node, it's gonna call the add child notify instead of the node at some point. In this part, I do remember seeing, but I didn't know for like what was the use case basically. But this basically allows you to put some logic every time that a child is added to a class. And it's basically obviously going to be an abstract function on the node class that doesn't do anything on the base class. But then if you override the function, you can put functionality of whatever you want to happen when you add a node to class. And this is basically the function that is running when you add a child to tab container. And this function is the one that is going to call add tab bar, and then it's going to add a tab with the name of the class you added to this. And that's the reason why when you add a child, it's going to show the tab, but if you don't add any child to this, it doesn't show anything. And this matters for the drag and drop because when you don't have a child and you set the drag and drop for the actual tab container class, which was what I was doing, then it's going to work when you're clicking inside of the container. But as soon as you add a child, the visible part is going to be from the tab bar and not from the tab container. So it kind of overrides the visible space on the tab container. So then I think you have to set the signal, or you have to call the macro for the tab bar that is initialized inside of the tab container and not from the tab container. It's basically the function. Actually, I think I'm going to explain how I did this as well. The class here, because this is another annoying part on Godot. It's annoying, but it's obviously understandable that they did things this way. But this is basically the function that I'm calling there in the beginning of the initialization. Also, I think it is working right now, which is the other problem that I thought I was going to have last time that I streamed. Which is like the moment I'm building this class, the state of this class is in a different moments than the class is actually going to run on the application or on the editor. So because of that, it's kind of hard to determine how to not make the construction of the class coupled with this class here. But the way that I found is by calling the function from outside of the class and then just using add child external inside of this class, which adds the child as if it's adding from outside of the class and not from inside of the class. And it has to do with the owner of the classes. So basically, it works kind of like a static method on this class here, the one that I'm using to create the layout, and it just builds the tree structure. But then as it does that, it changes the state of the class through the dictionary. In the dictionary, I'm using the dictionary just for serializing and deserializing the information. And then on the notification ready of this class here, I'm passing the information from the dictionary to a hash map. So that is faster because I'm caching the information based on the node path. Because that's what ChatGPT recommended, and I think it makes sense. It's just easier to set up. Actually, I was doing based on the node path, but now I think I'm doing based on the name. Because I think with the node path I had a problem. So I'm creating a unique name and then I'm caching based on the name, I think. But it's basically the same thing. So I just get the nodes on the initialization and translate the nodes to the hash map, so I don't have to look up the nodes each time on each function. And then I design the function based on the hash map of the class instead of designing based on the dictionary. So I just use the dictionary to translate to serialize and deserialize the class state. And in order to do this, you have to subscribe whatever member variable you want to cache or to serialize on the scene. It has to be subscribed with add property macro inside of the bind methods. And the reason why is because that's how on the function that is going to save the scene file Godot, I don't remember really well how it works, but it's just going to loop over the classes, and it's going to use these other classes, which I think is property info and method bind, to get the information of the state of the class, and then it's going to use that to cache on the, or to write on the scene file. So if you don't use that property, then it's like Godot's not aware that the class has the property, so it doesn't save anything. And that's the reason why you need to, anything that you want to save as the state of the class has to be class supported by the variant class, because the variant class is the one that is used to translate the information. But basically, here's the thing that I changed. So I maybe should show the function before. I should show the layout, then I'm going to show this, because obviously this is related. So the constructor, I'm not doing anything. I was calling the function here, but now I'm calling from the class that the function that I'm using to build the scene, which I think is this one. So I basically just create I have to set the name on the root, because otherwise the editor throws a warning. And then this is basically the code now, and I think it's gonna be it's gonna become a lot simpler to build things. So I might not need, I think I'm gonna probably change the name of the files, and then I'm just gonna put everything on a file, because I think that the amount of code to build the scene is not gonna be large. It's mainly gonna be just functions on the dockable layout that are gonna change the initial layout, and then the state's gonna be determined by whatever's passed as an argument, probably to a dockable layout. Or I mainly change the layouts and just create more functions inside dockable layouts to have the starting points. And then all the other code that is going to exist in the function is just going to be different classes that work inside the containers. At least that's how I'm thinking about. Maybe there's going to be problems on the way, and then I'm going to have to change, but for now, that's how I'm thinking. So this function, add child external, is a function that I added to Godot, and basically this is another variable that I added, but this is for something else that I was trying to do. And in order to avoid traversing the node twice, the moment that is inside of a constructor and if it's added outside, I just basically added these variables to differentiate. And Godot already has this internal, but the internal I think wasn't working for what I was trying to do, because I think the purpose of this is different. I still haven't spent too much time figuring this out. But I'm 100% sure that it is different than what I was trying to achieve. And the other main difference is just setting the owner, basically. Because if you don't set the owner on the nodes, and I think that the owner has to be the root of the scene you're trying to save. If you don't do that, then it doesn't serialize the nodes. And that's basically the main difference between this one and this one. And that's the whole thing that I wasn't sure how to do it, because like if I build the layout inside of the class, then how it's gonna work with the other nodes that I build outside, and then how I'm gonna connect them. That's basically what the problem was. But I think this way that I'm doing now is probably gonna work. And this add child here is gonna call this one, and this is the one I think that's this is the one that is gonna call add child notify, which is the function that the other class defines. That's gonna run logic every time that you add a node to another node. And I might be able to change some of the classes, but I'm not sure. But it's very good to know this, because in the future, obviously, if I want to add functionality based on the children, I can use this instead of connecting through signals and stuff like that. So it's just a virtual function on the node class. So basically here, the main function is going to be this one, which is just the create layouts. And I have a standard or a default argument here. I think that's how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to do it based on this enum here. So each value of the enum is going to be a different layout, and then I have an entry point function on this one. and then I just call the function to build. And I'm probably gonna manually build each layout. And if I decided that there's too much variance between one layout or like they're not too different, then I can just put the information as an argument. Sure. And if I do that, then I'm probably gonna have to put or to change the variables of the class, because that's probably gonna be easier to set than to change this function here each time. Because like this is the problem, like this is the bottleneck between the outside state and the class state. So I think what I'm gonna do is just gonna cap this one to this argument here, and then if I want to have variance on the layouts, I just figure out a way to change the state of the class so that I can set different variables on the class before I call create layouts, and then it does different things depending on which layout it is. These functions here are just created to make it easier to see the connection of the nodes, and because I want to create like a standard for each space of the layout that gets created, because I think that's better. Because this is just like the initial structure of the scene. I think I did. I don't remember if but pretty sure I did for the splits. So every time that I create a split, I call this add split node. Then this one is basically going to be the same as the doc nodes. It's like the same structure. I'm just using this V format to make the splits based on a count that I have in the class. I was doing a static count, but I decided to just static int. I decided to do a normal integer because I think it doesn't matter that much. And then it sets the name of the split, and then it caches on the dictionary, and I'm caching on the hash map, but it's probably not necessary as well. But maybe it is, because I think I might have to run this. Like when it comes to implementing the drag and drop, I'm not really sure how it's gonna work. So I might have to run this one and run this one to add and remove stuff from the dictionary. This one, I think that's I have to change this. I'm not really sure if it's good to, like, because I'm removing the values as I'm looping over the hash, which is probably not very good. Oh no, I'm removing from the other one, not from the hash. But this one on the doc is basically the same. We're just gonna add based on the count here. So it's gonna be like this is gonna be the standard. This is another thing that I was thinking about, is that I'm not really sure if I'm gonna have to change the icon sidebar because of this. I changed the name that I had there. And it's kind of confusing because of the tab bar. That was one of the things I was thinking about. I don't remember. Yeah, I left like this, which I probably should still do. Actually, probably not. This probably has to be doc 0. Because the issue is that this one requires a specific name. And I was thinking about whether or not it can change, but the problem is the serialization of the class. So I think I have to make it like this, where it's dynamic. But this is a different thing that I'm going to think about later, because I think that's too confusing if I try to solve both things at the same time. So basically this one's the same, it's just going to add to the dictionary and to the hash map, and then it's going to increase the counts. And every time that I add a doc, I call this function, and every time that I add a split, I call the other one. The other property that I was talking about is these ones. So you just use property info. You pass the type of the variant it is. Because this is an enum on the variant class, and then you pass the name of the property, which is the name of the variable inside of the class. And these things I think is for some situations where they have both when they are serializing the thing, but I think it doesn't matter that much. So we just copy it from another place and just put this hint none. But maybe at some point I'll look more into this to see how it works. Well, these are just basically the names of the setters and getters of the functions that it. These functions you also need to subscribe them on ClassDB on byte methods. Otherwise, Godot can find the functions, so the property doesn't work. And because you need to subscribe the functions, the argument has to be supported. The type has to be supported by variant. That's why I'm using a dictionary. So the layout, this layout here is basically the part of the IDE scene that contained the docs that I want to put there, and I obviously haven't tested, but the way that I'm thinking about is like the layout's gonna be like a subsection of the scene, so it's gonna be it's gonna work as if it's a normal node on this scene. I mean, I can put whatever I want. I can either make the layout the whole scene, or I can make it just normal nodes, and then I create the fixed parts of the scenes outside here, and then I just create functions of the dockable layouts or actually not on the dockable layout, but I just connect them on the nodes, and then I position the dockable layouts whatever I want based on that. And but I have to think more about this because the way that I did it here is use the VBox container just to make it easier because it wasn't working to show the size. So the VBox container has functions from the container as well that they are gonna make the children take the whole space of the thing if they have the flags. So that should take the whole space. So if I don't use VBox container there, it wasn't showing the elements because they were shrinked, even though I'm setting the flags on these functions. So this is something that I was thinking about, like maybe I should do this now to make this inherit from control and then just copy the functions that the VBox container has and put on the dockable layouts tab. And also have the functions on the container. Then after this, I can spend time looking on those functions, seeing if I can simplify to find just the parts. Because the main thing that I was trying to achieve, and that I'm still trying to achieve, is to have like a standard way to set each doc to be just determine to take the whole space and to determine its size based on the structure of the splits, and then make the splits standard as well. Because that way I have like a predictable way of just changing the how many splits I want and in which direction I want. And I have like I'm gonna have a standard template to start the scenes with. So this is basically, and this is the parts that I started creating the panel, but then I decided the tab, and I'm probably gonna stick with the tab, but maybe later I can also change the containers the nodes that are responsible for being the placeholder for the content nodes. But I think the tab container is probably the best. And it's probably what I'm going to focus on. And if I want to change the visualization, just create on the theme configuration to change. And to make the tabs not show, all you need to do is set tabs visible to false. But this is one of the biggest issues, I think, which is related to the drag and drop. Because the main point of this class is to create the layout structure inside of the tree, keep track of the states of the layout structure, and then reorder the tree or restructure the tree on every time there is a drag and drop that requires that. So the main point is mainly the drag and drop functionality, I think. So every time I add here, I put there on the dictionary. And like the thing that is confusing is like how to make it work when the container doesn't have tabs and when the container has tabs, because I think that is going to change the way that I do the drag and drop functionality. So that's the part that I'm struggling to think about. So the moment I run this on the scene there, it's just going to run the layouts and it's going to create the structure of the tree. And because I'm using add child external on the layouts, it's going to create the tree as if I'm not creating inside of the class. So I'm creating outside because this creates the root node of the layout. And this is actually it works because I'm using the class, the dockable layout class as the bridge, because the dockable layout is going to be a part of the tree as well. So because I add, the problem with this one is that you need to, the node needs to be inserted on the tree before it adds children, because otherwise it doesn't work. Like if I also I was putting set tabs visible here to files. So if I try to add another child using add child external to left split before I add left split to the root, it doesn't work because of the way I created the logic here. Because it traverses the tree to find the node, which is the root, by getting the parents of each one. So if I call before the node is connected on the main tree, then the child can't find the owner, and then it doesn't cache the node on the scene. So this is one of the issues. But here is doing the connection because it's being bridged by the dockable layout. So I create the roots of the thing here, but then it's bridged outside. And the caching of the state is done through the dictionary that is done through these functions. And then on the notification ready, so when the function is gonna be deserialized, so after you run, it's gonna cache that state of the class on the scene file based on the dictionary state, which was created by the layout function. Then I created these functions here that are gonna take the values of the dictionaries, and it's gonna translate. It's gonna get the nodes, and it's gonna translate on the hash map. And then on the other function, I'm probably gonna use the hash map to find the nodes. And this function is the one that I'm using now to set the drag and drop by using the macro here. And the main difference between calling this macro and calling the functions directly. So this macro is a macro that is from the control class. And the from is going to be the whatever node you put there. And this is one of the parts that I'm trying to clarify now. Because here, the main difference between calling this outside is that here is going to bind the from on each of the functions. So we have access to the from node as an argument on the functions there. But the parts that I don't understand very well is like what is the connection inside of the functions, how to make sense of the relationship between the from node and the to, because of the way that they have there on the tab container, which I'm gonna show next. But the to here is obviously the type you pass there, so the callables are gonna be from this class here, which is the class that I'm creating, and they need the standard names there. That's the macro sets, which is this get drag data and these macros basically. So I have to, if you will use this macro, I have to define these functions on the class, which I did here. So get drag data is going to be the first one that runs, and you're supposed to return a variant that is going to be used by the other functions. Then can drop data, you put the logic to see whether or not you can drop the element. And drop data is the part that has to determine how to drop the data. Like what happens when the mouse lets go. So the part that I'm trying to clarify now is the relationship between the from nodes. So here, the reason why I did it like this is because if I don't add any children to the tab, then like it has to work on both cases, I think. If I don't add any children, then the child node, this child node is a tab container that I'm using to create the layouts. And now I just realized I should probably put tab container here instead. But then, I'm not sure if it matters that much. Because this is going to be the object there that is passed on the function. It's going to be this p from node here. So I think that is already clear. because I was kind of confused. So like the code that is running here is from the perspective of the node that is being dragged to. And the first object, the first class is the one that is the from. So like the moment that the event happens is gonna happen on the first node here. And then the moment the function runs is gonna be from the perspective of the node that is receiving the other one. That makes sense. Yeah, I think now it's more clear on my mind how it works. Yeah, this get tab bar is gonna get the tab bar from the tab container. But I think that's this is probably fine. Like I connect basically the two drag and drop functions on both the tab container and on the tab bar from the tab container. So what I have to do is change these functions here because these ones were from ChatGPT and it was based on another design that I had before. So the tab container also sets this up by default here. So it does based on the tab bar that it has with the tab container here. I guess it is still kind of confusing because of the way that they do the logic there. So I'm not really sure. So it's connect. This is going to be the from, and this is going to be the class that receives the event. Because the way that they do it, so I'm going to put breakpoints and I'm going to step over it probably. So these are the functions that are going to run on the drag and drop. And they call these functions from the tab bar. But then these functions are the ones that are kind of confusing to understand. So I think I think well, the problem is like if I'm not really sure which situation to take into consideration first, or if it is a good idea to take both situations. Like because not adding anything as a child is more a situation where I want to test things without any children to see like just the layout and do this. But I think realistically, on most or probably all situations, is gonna have a child, which means it's gonna have the tab bar. The question that I have, because I need to do the logic of the functions based on what is the node that is the from, the node that is gonna be received there. Because if the node is the tab container itself, then obviously I can just call the functions from there. I'm gonna do the functions that they do, but some additional functions as well, I think. I'm just gonna delete this as well. Well, the problem is like this can be either the tab or it can be the tab container. So I guess the question I'm thinking about is whether or not to make it so that to comment this out basically. But if I comment this out, then I can't drag the. If there is no children, you can't really drag the container. Hmm. Because what I did before was that I created another function just for this. That like I was adding the tab. I was adding another tab because I didn't understand how it works as well. So I was adding this other tab just to see the tabs there. Because like in the way that it is now, it's not gonna show anything, I think. But I don't remember. I think last time we're just gonna run on the debugger to see how it looks. Maybe I changed the function that I did to get the tabs. Oh, I'm still adding the tabs here. Yeah, so the way that I'm doing now is basically manually adding a tab just to see the tab there. And I have to add, I created the other function because of the thing that I talked about, so the add child external. So I have to add the tab to the tab container after the tab container is inserted as a part of the tree. Otherwise, it doesn't cache on the scene. So that's the reason why I created this other function. And this one I just set as visible to false just to see, because probably the sidebar of content is not gonna, I don't want to show the tabs to show there. Because the logic is gonna be done by the echo sidebar. But I'm not really sure like what to do there. Because like the situation, the only situation that makes sense is that if they have a child. So maybe before I do this, I should create like the function that adds the children to the dots. Obviously, it's not very hard to think about the logic because like you can cast the node to both types and then just check to see if the type exists, and then you know what situation you're on. But it's more a question like what direction should I go with because of the overall picture of how the class is gonna work. And I'm not really sure. Because the other thing, obviously, that I can do, that I'm thinking about is just get the tab. Get the tab bar, and then just add a tab for each one. Like a fake tab. And then what I can do is just remove the fake tab. If the node has a child already. And maybe that's, so I probably should do that now. So maybe I leave the way that it is there. Because I'm already adding a new tab. It doesn't make sense to just get the tab bar from the tab container. Maybe actually it does. So I have to see if it caches. If it caches, then it's going to be easier to add the tab bar. Like I add the fake tab just to see if... And the other problem with not having the tab, but I'm not really sure if that's like there's a way to solve this, is that if you don't have the tab, then you can't really move the container. Because if I do the functionality of the drag and drop piece on the tab bar, then obviously you can only move if the tab container has a tab bar. Otherwise, it's not going to trigger the events. But this is a bigger problem because it depends on the, like, obviously it doesn't make sense to make the tab container inputs overrides whatever is going to be inside of the tab container. Because like, if that was the case, I wouldn't be able to have any classes that would be used for the content that would have any inputs, because the tab container would override those inputs. So it doesn't make sense to do this, I think. But then if I don't do it, then if there is a, so I'm thinking mainly of the icon sidebar for now, which is the example that I have now. So the icon sidebar probably not gonna have tabs because the logic is gonna be done through the icons to change whatever is displayed on the container. And I'm so like the thing that I was thinking before is to make a setting or to make like an option on the navbar thing here that changes the state to display the tabs just so you can drag. But then like you're only gonna be able to use that if you know that's the case. So the question is like how to make it so that, or maybe I can always set a tab and then just change the style of the tab so that is an icon, because I know that the tab bar has icons as well. based on the logic that I saw there. So maybe I think that's probably better. It's probably better to always show the tab and then just change the way that the tab is displayed based on what component it is. Because like I said before, I was thinking about doing like a this icon here. Not sure how to say this in English, but this thing that is usually used for settings. I was thinking about adding an icon like this on the icon sidebar to change some configurations or something. So I could put the dragging logic inside of the like yeah on the thing, and I could change the style of the tabs so that it shows the icons instead. Maybe that's a better way to. Hmm. Yeah, so this one doesn't show there because it's not tabs visible to false. The question is whether or not. So here you can see that it's running because of the element there that is showing as you drag. Is running the one that I have on the dockable layouts. And if I don't set to the tab bar, it's gonna run the one that has on the tab container, which I think displays the name of the tab. And this one is not gonna work, but the tab container, it allows you to move the tabs from one place to the other. But the main thing that is hard to decide is whether or not all of them are always gonna have tabs. Always gonna have visible tabs. It probably is better to do it like this, I think. I think it's probably better to always have a tab on the container. So I'm gonna add these tabs by default, and then as I create the hash map, I remove. Problem is that I'm gonna have to find based on the. I think I actually. I think it's probably better to see if I can add the tab first. Yeah, I think adding the tab and then seeing if it caches with the tabs better. Because the problem is I'm gonna have to find the node based on the name, which is the tab that I'm adding to remove there each time. It's not very good. It's probably better to see if I can cache. Because then it's also easier to do it. So I think it's get tab bar. Actually, Let's see if it works. And then I just add the tab here. Now the problem is that I need to do it after, I think. Hold on, I can put the same thing that I was doing here. And then I can do the a normal one. Then tab bar and tab. So the question is gonna be, so I'm gonna test. So there are two different questions. One is whether or not this is gonna cache the thing. And the other one is if it is gonna, if I add another class, what happens? And also whether or not it's gonna mess up the, so if I do like this, I should also remove the, but the other one should, can be useful for other control nodes, I think. This adding directly to the child. Yeah, but probably like the more that I think about it, it's probably better just to always make tab container, because like if you there isn't a way to add the event to the actual class, to the actual component, because then it's gonna override whatever events you have on the classes, which doesn't make sense. So it needs to be like on a spot that is outside of the container. Like the downside of using the tab container is that it kind of messes up the layout of the scene because there's more like noise on the thing. And like a lot of classes I'm gonna use tabs as well, so like there's gonna be stacked tabs, which is kind of annoying. But I think that's the reason why, like, is using the settings is probably gonna is like the easiest way to deal with this. So like I create a option on the navbar that I have there to set the tabs visible or not, and then I make a control node that determines how many tabs you have, and then just emits a signal with the index. Then based on the index, I receive the signal from the layouts, and then I just set the tabs invisible for that thing. So that way you can always change what is shown and what is not shown. So I think probably I'm gonna leave it like this. So I'm gonna assume that there's always a tab container. There's always a tab on the tab container. Yeah. And then the event's gonna be from the tab bar of the tab container. So what I'm gonna do on the functions is to get the I'm gonna get the parents in the cases that I need a tab container, obviously. And for the other ones, I'm just gonna call the function directly from the tab container. And this is gonna be like the starting point, which is just gonna be the same functionality that they already have. And then I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time thinking on how to restructure the tree, which is gonna be very annoying, I think, because I think it's gonna be very complicated to think about. Also, I changed the order that I was adding the stuff here. because of the way that the size that it looks. I think it doesn't matter that much, so. Because what I'm gonna do as well on the layouts, I think, is gonna be to create a save function, the same like kind of in the same style that I had on the file system or the FS view or file system presenter. Just gonna save the configuration, so I need to get the sizes of the layouts and stuff like that, and the position of the docs and stuff like that. And for this part, I think I'm probably gonna see how they do it on the editor, because I know the editor they have functions to save the layouts, and then obviously I'm gonna have to change for my stuff. So this is the part. This is the problem, is that doesn't. I guess what I can do is to set the moment I'm putting them on the cache. I think it's probably better. So yeah, that's probably the best solution. So I check to see if they have a child. If they don't, I add the tabs. So as I'm translating them to the hash,